Now, whilst the tutorial started out okay, things took a turn for the worse. Hi guys, so for those who've been following my game dev journey, you may have noticed that I've been focusing a lot more on C# programming, coding, and scripting, a lot more than other aspects of game dev. And the reason for that is I wanted to get C# just right before I dove into Unity, because then at least I'd know what was going on. Now, after a couple of months of C#, I do feel relatively confident as a beginner. And added to that, I did have a number of comments on social media, including YouTube, encouraging me to just start with Unity and start making things. So thanks, Paul Conniff. I also have a friend, Thomas, who made something with Unity recently, and that inspired me to just get stuck in. So I did. I started with the most basic tutorial on the Unity website, which is called Rollerball, and it's for free. Fantastic. I thought the free Unity tutorials were great. I mean, right from the start, they showed what the 3D objects looked like, what they were capable of doing, although I did have some issues moving the camera. They were clear. They told you exactly where to save certain folders, how to organize your stuff, where to find and create game objects and planes, etc. Now they even have a nice, soothing voice to take you through these tutorials.
Let's get started and create a game board or playfield. You're going to do this by using...
Now, whilst the tutorial started out okay, things took a turn for the worse. After creating a basic blue ball and grey ground, I had to make the ball move with the C# script. Now, don't get me wrong, if you want to copy and paste code and just use it, then this stuff works perfectly fine. But I had a real issue with understanding, what exactly was a function that I myself had created and what I was calling from Unity, what I was feeding back into Unity, and why certain functions were being used. None of these were really properly explained, and I found that most comments by others on the tutorials reflected this sentiment. And, for example, looking through this script that they've provided to me, we have certain private functions, rigid body. They don't exactly explain what the rigid body does. Does it feed into Unity, or is it calling something from Unity? I think it feeds into something to Unity, and then you define it yourself in the script as RB, okay. And then you've got a couple of XY variables which use the float value. And then we've got the first method, which is the void start. And the void start, I understand to only apply right at the start of the game. RB equals get component rigid body just means the script. Actually, you know what? I have no idea what that means. I'm just guessing. Again, I'm not sure if this is feeding into Unity or it's taking from Unity, and they didn't explain that in the tutorials. So I'm just going to have to proceed on this basis, on a kind of trusted basis for the time being, and figure it out as I go along. Now, I'm sure I could Google a lot of this, but it didn't particularly help that the tutorials didn't just explain what the code was doing. And then we move on to the next part, which was, to me, even more confusing. You've got a method called onMove, and then you've got a method called fixed update. Now, fixed update, I understand to relate to anything on physics. Fine, okay. onMove is activated when basically a button is pressed. When a button is pressed, the vector2, which is basically in a 2D plane, it's the X and Y position. So that is activated, and it's been confined to two variables, movement X and movement Y. Okay. And then in the fixed update, we've got vector3, which to me, it's like, why have we moved from vector2 to vector3 if we're, if we started out with a three-dimensional game, why didn't we just go for vector3? And what's even more confusing about vector3, and they don't explain this, is that, of course, you've got X, Y, Z. The Y axis on this is the vertical plane, and the two horizontal planes are X and Z. And so when you're inputting movement X and movement Y into vector3, you've got movement X as the X-axis, you've got 0 as the Y-axis in vector3, and then movement Y, which is usually your Y-axis, has now been input as a z-axis in 3 dimensions. So, you know, they didn't explain any of this, and I had to work through this myself. And maybe what was more frustrating about all of this is I considered myself to be pretty okay at C# at this point, and even this took a little bit of kind of deciphering to figure out. So I was a little bit disappointed that the Unity tutorials, I know they're free, but I was a little bit disappointed that they didn't take you through the kind of detail that one would have expected. But there it is, and I'll just have to work through it. And as you can see there, I was looking at what is vector 2, what is vector 3, why did they have to use 2 different vectors? My guess is that vector 2s were reserved for the inputs, and so essentially you are limiting the input values, and so you don't have the potential to also have vertical y-axis movement on the ball. I don't know, they didn't explain that. Despite all this, you know, when I actually got the ball to move, and given all the complexities and the mysteries of the script I had just written, I had a small moment where I thought I'd successfully, you know, cast a spell in the digital world and made this ball come to life. I know it's a simple task, but it's actually pretty cool. Now, I'm sure as I go on, I'll understand what the script is doing and what these tutorials actually mean and how these game components work. For now, I'm just going to have to go through the frustrating process of, you know, reverse engineering some of these things and figuring out why exactly something has been done. So I'll see you in the next video when I work through the rest of this tutorial and make my first game.